read this with discussion. So the way I tell you guys when I read, you're not going to remember everything I read, but just pay attention to what your mind brings you to. It's only a few pages. Thank you for being here, Rose. If you're here, please put a 1 in the comments. YouTube, welcome back. We are ready to read chapter 13. This is on the brain. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Listen, I know sometimes you think reading is boring, but if you can just keep this on while you're doing whatever you're doing, your mind is going to draw you to certain paragraphs that you need to hear. That's going to be part of your growth and your development. The best thing to do is when you hear it, write it in the comments. Write what you heard so you can further instill it in your brain. So chapter 13, interestingly enough, is on the brain. The 12th step towards riches. More than 20 years ago, the author, working in conjunction with the late Dr. Alexander Graham Bell, y'all know that name, and Dr. Elmer Gates, observed that every human brain is both a broadcasting and receiving station for the vibration of thought. So when me and Yada, and we talk about the brain and your thoughts create everything, what we're saying is exactly that. They've scientifically found out that your brain is receiving and broadcasting at the same time. Through the medium of the ether, in a fashion similar to that employed by the radio broadcasting principle, every human brain is capable of picking up vibrations of thought, which are being released by other brains. Did you know that you can do that? I know my boyfriend does it because I can just write something in text and he immediately knows something's off. So that's your brain working in that way. In connection with this statement, in the preceding paragraph, compare and consider the description of the creative imagination. The creative imagination is the receiving set of the brain, which receives thoughts released by the brains of others. It is the agency of communication between one's conscious or reasoning mind and the four sources from which one may receive thought stimuli. When stimulated, yes, meeting, and that's what we have. We have here, when we're meeting every morning, this is like our own little mastermind group because we're discussing events, we're discussing things, and we're growing our thought processes. When stimulated or stepped up to a high rate of vibration, the mind becomes more receptive to the vibration of thought, which reaches it through the ether from outside sources. This stepping up process takes place through positive emotions or negative emotions. Through the emotions, the vibrations of thought may be increased. Vibrations of an exceedingly high rate are the only vibrations picked up and carried by the ether from one brain to another. Thought is energy traveling at an exceedingly high rate of vibration. Thought, which has been modified or stepped up by any of the major emotions, vibrates at a much higher rate than ordinary thought, and it is the type of thought which passes from one brain to another. So when you're actually thinking with emotion, you're broadcasting at a stronger vibration. Thank you for the fave, Sami. Brad says 100. Vega says, I love it. Awesome. The emotion of sex stands at the head of the list of human emotions as far as intensity and driving force are concerned. The brain, which has been stimulated by the emotion of sex, vibrates at a much more rapid rate than it does when that emotion is quiescent or absent. So look at that. Sex sells. No, I'm just kidding. A strong mind will listen because they always have something to say. Yeah, and then do you notice like when you're in conversation with some people, there's always that one person everybody draws to, right? Or everybody listens to. Why is that? Because their brain is sending out the higher frequency, right? The brain, which has been stimulated by the emotion of sex, vibrates at a much more rapid rate. The result of sex transmutation is the increase of the rate of vibration of thoughts to such a pitch that the creative imagination becomes highly receptive to ideas. So let me ask the room a question. When you have a consistent sexual partner, have you noticed your life gets better? And I'm really just asking, just curiosity. Have you noticed when you're in a happy relationship, the sex is good, you have consistent sexual practices with a person that you love, have you noticed a change in your life? Could you tell me, just in the comments as I read, tell me what the changes that you noticed when you were in a happy relationship, emotionally connected, and sexually connected to a person? What did you notice in your life? On the other hand, when the brain is vibrating at a rapid rate, it not only attracts thoughts and ideas released by other brains through the medium of the ether, but it gives to one's own thoughts that feeling, which is essential before those thoughts will be picked up and acted on by one's subconscious mind. Thus, you will see that the broadcasting principle is the factor through which you mix feelings and emotions with your thoughts and pass them on to your subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is the sending station of the brain. That's amazing. Okay, so, oh, good. You guys wrote in energy, happiness, peaceful, light, pretty inside and out. And I look forward to being with my mate, especially when life keeps you occupied. Happy thoughts like you can tackle the world. I love this. So, guys, do we see now why it's so important about who we choose as a mate? Do we understand that concept? You know, for those of you that have been single for a long time, now you could rejoice in that, saying, wow, it's because I understand that the real happiness and success of my life depends on my thoughts and emotions. Thank you, wisdom. Okay, light brown. Right. So if you've been single for a while and you've been beating yourself up, don't beat yourself up. You're looking for the right person to come in, to have the right sex with you, the right kind of love with you, the right experience with you. So it not only benefits them, but it benefits you in your life as well. So now we understand why it's so important who you lie down with, you know, in bed. And it does take time to meet the one. Absolutely. Which I'll give you guys some tips because I did manifest my perfect soulmate in 3 months, not 1 year. And I'll give you tips on how I did that. Along with the important factors of the subconscious mind and the faculty of the creative imagination, which constitute the sending and receiving sets of your mental broadcasting machinery. Consider now the principle of auto-suggestion, which is the medium by which you may put into operation your broadcasting station. Okay? Operation of your mental broadcasting station is a simple procedure. You have 3 principles to bear in mind and to apply when you wish to use your broadcasting station: the subconscious mind, creative imagination, and auto-suggestion. The stimuli through which you put these 3 principles into action begins with desire. Friendship is important, yeah. I'm in Northern Virginia. Friendship is very important, but to me, you got to be careful with friendship because my ex-boyfriend and I were good friends, and we didn't really have that chemistry as I currently have with my current partner. That's okay. Thank you. Thank you for trying or thinking of trying it. So the depression brought the world to the very borderline of understanding of the forces which are intangible and unseen. Through the ages which have passed, man has depended too much upon his physical senses and has limited his knowledge to physical things, which he could see, touch, weigh, and measure. We are now entering the most marvelous of all ages, an age which will teach us something of the intangible forces of the world. Perhaps we shall learn as we pass through this age that the other self is more powerful than the physical self. We're talking about our soul. That is more powerful than the physical body. Sometimes men speak lightly of intangibles, the things which they cannot see through any of their 5 senses. And when we hear them, it should remind us that all of us are controlled by forces which are unseen and intangible. I live here. The whole of mankind has not the power to cope with nor control intangible forces wrapped up in the rolling waves of the oceans. Man has not the capacity to understand the intangible force of gravity, which keeps this little earth suspended in midair and keeps man from falling from it, much less the power to control that force. Man is entirely subservient to the intangible force, which comes with a thunderstorm, and he is just as helpless in the presence of the intangible force of electricity. So if you believe that you're only affected by outside things which you can see, you're not really grasping the reality of this reality. The reality of our reality is that we are actually being controlled by intangible, unseen things. Okay? Man, with all of his boasted culture and education, understands little or nothing of the intangible force. He knows little concerning the physical brain and its vast network of intricate machinery through which the power of thought is translated into material equivalents. Men of science have begun to turn their attention to the study of this thing called a brain. And while they're still in the kindergarten stage of their studies, they have uncovered enough knowledge to know that the central switchboard of the brain, the number of lines which connect the brain cells one with another, equals the figure 1 followed by 15 million ciphers. Yeah. There's so much that we don't know. So when people sit here and say, I can't become a millionaire this lifetime, I can't achieve that dream house I've always wanted, I really feel sorry, because when you understand the principles of the universe, everybody can have everything they want. But it takes education, it takes self-study, it takes insight and reflection for you to really understand and grasp the power of this world. And it's not woo-woo, it's not magic, it's just natural laws. Learn the natural laws, you wouldn't ever be sad or uncomfortable or depressed or alone or abandoned ever again, because the natural laws can teach you how to recreate your situation. It can be, but the good news is that you find a group of people who's interested in learning and that makes learning fun, and then you grow with those group of people. Yes, love, peace, and happiness are the morals. That's the way of life, should be the way of life for everyone. You know? So they talk about how our brain is just made up of all these intricate nerve cells, like over 10 million to 14 million nerve cells. After this book had been written, just before the manuscript went to publisher, there appeared in the New York Times an editorial showing that at least one great university and one intelligent investigator in the field of mental phenomena are carrying on an organized research through which conclusions have been reached that parallel many of those described in this and the following chapter. The editorial briefly analyzed the work carried on by Dr. Ryan and his associates at Duke University, which is interesting because the Ryan Institute is here in Virginia. And I've been meaning to go, but Dr. Ryan, he was a known parapsychologist who was beginning to investigate the paranormal, things like remote viewing and telepathy and psychokinesis. They were studying and realizing that people can move objects with their mind. People can levitate. People can do all these things that people think are not. If you Google the Ryan Institute, Rhine, you'll find out a lot about him and who he is. Yeah, it's right here in Virginia, and I've been meaning to go because I've been to a lot of the centers. I've been to Omega, Yogaville, but I haven't been to Ryan yet. I did study with one of the original, the U.S. The Pentagon. They used to employ remote viewers, and the original remote viewer, Miss Backwoods. I'm nearly done this chapter, Miss Backwoods. If you want to hang out, I'll give you a reading. I just have 2 more pages. So I did study with Paul. He was one of the original remote viewers that was hired by the Pentagon back in the 70s to do work against Russia. And it was pretty interesting learning remote viewing. That's a whole other thing. Okay, so they say, what is telepathy? A month ago, we cited on this page some of the remarkable results achieved by Professor Ryan and his associates in Duke University from more than 100,000 tests to determine the existence of telepathy and clairvoyance. The results were summarized in the first 2 articles in Harper's Magazine. In the second, which has now appeared, the author, E.H. Wright, attempts to summarize what has been learned regarding the exact nature of these extrasensory modes of perception. The actual existence of telepathy and clairvoyance now seems to some scientists enormously probable as a result of Ryan's experiments. Various recipients were asked to name as many cards in a special pack as they could without looking at them and without other sensory access. About a score of men and women were discovered who could regularly name as many of the cards correctly, that there was not one chance in many a million of them having done so. So basically, they were saying it wasn't luck, that these people were able to actually read a pack of cards without even looking at the pack of cards. But how did they do it? These powers do not seem to be sensory. There's no known organ for them. Okay? All known forms of radiant energy decline inversely as the square of the distance traversed. Telepathy and clairvoyance do not. So that means that you don't need to be, a lot of times people ask me, can I do a psychic reading for them over the phone? Yeah, because it's not about time and space. It's about, it's an ability, okay? But they do vary through physical causes as our mental powers do. Contrary to widespread opinion, they do not improve when the percipient is asleep or half asleep, but on the contrary, when he is most wide awake and alert. Rhine discovered that a narcotic will invariably lower a percipient's score, while a stimulant will always send it higher. The most reliable performer apparently cannot make a good score unless he tries to do his best. One conclusion that Wright draws is that telepathy and clairvoyance are really one and the same gift. That is, the faculty that sees a card face down on a table seems to be exactly the same one that reads a thought residing only in another mind. You know what's funny is I do exercises at my studio, and I have to literally put on headphones or walk away because I actually affect the studies. So I would have I would have students in a classroom, and I would give, like, I'd pair them up in pairs, and I would give them flashcards with a circle, a triangle, a star, a square, and then they had to like hold the they had to hold it up. And I'll play that game today. They have to hold a card up, and then they can see what the image is on here, but the other person can't see. And the person would have to guess. I had to leave the room because my thought signals were so strong that everybody in the room was picking up what I was thinking, and it was messing up the experiments. So when I do these experiments, I have to kind of like I have to like go on Facebook or listen to music. I can't tune in, because if I tune in, I affect it, you know? In view of Dr. Ryan's announcement, in connection with the conditions under which the mind responds to what he terms extrasensory modes of perception, I now feel privileged to add to his testimony by stating that my associates and I have discovered what we believe to be the ideal conditions under which the mind can be stimulated. The conditions to which I refer consist of a close working alliance between myself and two members of my staff. Through experimentation and practice, we discovered how to stimulate our minds, okay, so that we can, by a process of blending out our three minds into one, find a solution to a great variety of personal problems which are submitted by my clients. The procedure is very simple. We sit down at a table, clearly state the nature of the problem we have under consideration, then begin discussing it. Each contributes whatever thoughts that may occur. The strange thing about this method of mind stimulation is that it places each participant in communication with unknown sources of knowledge, definitely outside his own experience. If you understand the principle described in the chapter on the mastermind, you, of course, recognize the roundtable procedure here described as being a practical application of the mastermind. This method of mind stimulation through harmonious discussion of definite subjects between three people illustrate the simplest and most practical use of the mastermind. By adopting and following a similar plan, any student of this philosophy may come into possession of the famous Carnegie formula. If it means nothing to you at this time, mark this page and read it again after you finish the last chapter. The depression was a blessing in disguise. It reduced the whole world to a new starting point that gives everyone a new opportunity. Therein ends chapter 13. Thank you guys for watching with me. I'll be back tomorrow with chapter 14.